Have you ever heard something so outrageous that it makes you question whether you're living in the same reality as everyone else? That was me, the day I walked into my own bedroom and caught my neighbor's teenage daughter shoving my jewelry into her pocket like it was the most normal thing in the world. The part that really sent me spinning wasn't even the theft itself. It was what she said when I demanded an explanation. With a little smirk, she goes, "HOA kids are allowed to borrow stuff." Borrow from my locked bedroom, as if my home had suddenly turned into some kind of neighborhood lending library. All right, let me rewind. I live in a neighborhood under the iron fist of one woman, Karen Miller, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA. She's the type of person who treats HOA bylaws like holy scripture. She's got rules for everything: how tall your grass can be, what color your mailbox must be, and how long your car is allowed to sit in the driveway before she slaps a notice on it. And of course, she thinks her daughter Tiffany is a flawless angel who floats above consequences. For the most part, I kept to myself. I paid my dues, kept my yard trimmed, nodded politely at the occasional HOA notice, and stayed out of drama. That worked just fine, until I hosted a small barbecue one Saturday afternoon. A few neighbors came over, kids ran wild through the yard, music was playing, nothing fancy. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Tiffany must have wandered off. I didn't realize anything was off at first. It wasn't until I ducked inside to grab another bottle of soda that I heard faint noises upstairs. I assumed it was one of the younger kids hiding during some game of tag. But when I reached the top of the stairs and saw my bedroom door cracked open, my stomach dropped. There she was, Tiffany, standing at my dresser with my jewelry box wide open like she owned the place. I watched her pluck out my late grandmother's gold bracelet, slip it into her pocket, and reach for a necklace as if she were browsing in a boutique. I pushed the door all the way open and shouted, "What the hell are you doing in here?" She jumped, but not with guilt. "No," she looked irritated, like I'd interrupted her mid-shopping spree. Then, with that infuriating little shrug, she said, "Mom says HOA kids can borrow. You'll get it back." My jaw nearly hit the floor. "Borrow? Tiffany, this is my bedroom. These are my things." She rolled her eyes like I was the unreasonable one. I demanded she hand everything over right then and there. She huffed, then pulled the bracelet and necklace from her pocket, slapping them into my hand like it was an inconvenience. But later, when I checked my jewelry box more carefully, I realized 2 rings were missing. She must have pocketed them before I walked in. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just some spoiled kid being sneaky. This was theft. And with Karen as her mother, I knew exactly how this was going to play out. When I confronted Tiffany again about the missing rings, she turned on the crocodile tears and the fake innocent routine. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you lost them." Then she stormed out of my house like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I was still fuming when, barely 10 minutes later, there was a loud knock at my door. And of course, it was Karen. She stood there with her arms crossed, wearing that smug little smirk like a crown. Tiffany was beside her, looking bored out of her mind. Karen didn't waste a second. "My daughter tells me you accused her of stealing," she said, her voice sharp like a knife. "That's a very serious accusation. She was simply following the HOA's community sharing rules." I blinked at her. "Community sharing rules?" "Karen, no rule lets anyone break into a locked bedroom and take jewelry. These are heirlooms." Karen waved her hand like I was talking about something trivial. "It's about fostering trust and cooperation. Children are allowed to borrow items from neighbors. It builds community spirit." I stared at her in disbelief. "You mean to tell me you think it's okay for your daughter to sneak into my room and pocket my things?" Karen's voice went cold. "What's not okay is you intimidating a child. Tiffany told me you yelled at her. That's harassment, and I won't tolerate it." That's when I knew logic wouldn't work on this woman. So I laid it out plainly. I told Karen 2 rings were missing, and if they weren't returned by the end of the day, I'd be calling the police. Her smile vanished. "If you do that," she snapped, "I'll make sure the HOA fines you for creating a hostile environment. We can vote to revoke your clubhouse privileges." I actually laughed. "Karen, this isn't about the stupid pool table at the clubhouse. Your daughter stole from me, period." Karen glared at me like I'd just declared war. Then she spun around, yanked Tiffany by the arm, and stormed off. For the rest of that day, I kept glancing at the porch, half expecting the missing rings to be returned quietly in some pathetic act of damage control. But of course, nothing ever showed up. That night, before I went to bed, I locked every window and door. For the first time, it hit me. The HOA wasn't just some annoying neighborhood club. They were dangerous. And if Karen Miller thought I'd just roll over and let this slide, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next morning, I woke up to pure chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts pouring in from neighbors, each one some version of "Karen's at it again." Turns out she'd spent the early hours going door to door, telling everyone I had falsely accused her daughter of theft. According to her, I was unstable, paranoid, and tearing the community apart. When I finally stepped outside, I could feel the shift in the air. 2 neighbors were already giving me suspicious looks. And there she was, Karen, standing across the street like some self-appointed queen, Tiffany right beside her. Tiffany had her head down, playing the victim, while Karen leaned in close to anyone who'd listen, whispering poison into their ears. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight across the street. "Where are my rings, Karen?" I said, loud enough for the small crowd around her to hear. Karen's lips curled into that smug little grin she wore like armor. "I don't know what you're talking about. Tiffany doesn't have them. Maybe you misplaced them. Or maybe—" She paused dramatically, milking the moment. "You're just trying to stir up trouble because you don't like following HOA rules." The audacity actually knocked the breath out of me for a second. Neighbors started murmuring. I could tell some believed me, but others were too scared to cross her. That's when it clicked. She was counting on public pressure to shut me up. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. "If those rings aren't returned," I said clearly, "I'll be involving the police. This isn't up for debate." For just a moment, her smile faltered, but then she quickly plastered it back on. "Go ahead," she said lightly. "Waste police time over some imaginary rings. Let's see how they feel when they hear you accuse a child without proof." And that's when I remembered my security cameras. I'd installed them mostly to monitor the front and back doors. But one camera faced the hallway leading upstairs. If Tiffany had gone into my bedroom, the footage would be there. I didn't give Karen the satisfaction of a reply. I turned around, walked back inside, and pulled up the footage. Sure enough, there it was. Tiffany sneaks upstairs during the barbecue, glancing around nervously before slipping into my bedroom. A few minutes later, she reappeared, shoving something shiny into her pocket. It wasn't a close-up of the rings, but it was undeniable proof she'd been in my room without permission. And when combined with me catching her red-handed, it was more than enough. That evening, with my hands still shaking from equal parts anger and adrenaline, I dialed the non-emergency police line. I calmly explained everything. They told me an officer would be dispatched to take a report. I hung up and took a deep breath. I knew things were about to get ugly. But for the first time, I also knew I wasn't the one on the defensive anymore. As the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the cul-de-sac, the patrol car pulled up. Blue lights splashed against the houses. And like clockwork, the moment Karen saw it, she came marching across the street as if she owned the pavement. Tiffany trailed behind her, arms folded, glaring at me like I was the criminal. The officer listened carefully as I laid everything out. How I'd found Tiffany in my bedroom, how she'd admitted to borrowing my jewelry, how the rings were still missing, and the footage of her sneaking upstairs. I handed him my phone, and he watched the video closely. Karen immediately jumped in, flailing her hands like she was in some community theater production. "This is ridiculous. My daughter was exploring. She's a child, for heaven's sake. This man is harassing her over imaginary rings." But the officer didn't look amused. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "child or not, entering someone's private bedroom and taking valuables without permission is theft. We take that very seriously." That wiped the smug grin off Karen's face. Tiffany muttered weakly, It was just borrowing. But the officer shut her down immediately. Borrowing requires permission. Did you have permission? Tiffany froze. She didn't have an answer. For once, the tide was turning. Karen's charm and HOA threats weren't working. The officer informed me that I had every right to press charges and that he'd file a formal report. That's when Karen snapped. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, loud enough for the entire street to hear. "If you involve the police, I'll make sure the HOA fines you into bankruptcy. No one will side with you after this." The officer turned to her calmly. "Ma'am, threatening someone for reporting a crime isn't wise. If you keep this up, you could end up in more trouble than your daughter." Karen's face turned the color of a fire truck. By now, neighbors had gathered around, watching everything unfold like a live show. But this time, nobody was nodding along. They were whispering, shaking their heads. Some were even glaring at Tiffany. The queen bee had just lost her hive. I went ahead and pressed charges. The officer explained that the case would be reviewed and Tiffany could face juvenile theft consequences. Karen screamed about lawsuits, HOA rules, and community betrayal, but not a single person backed her up. As the patrol car pulled away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Maybe my rings would come back, maybe they wouldn't. But the truth was out now. Karen and Tiffany weren't untouchable anymore. That night, I locked my jewelry box, sat back in my chair, and let out a long breath. Sometimes, standing up to bullies isn't about winning everything back. It's about making sure they finally face the consequences. And if Karen thought she could rule this neighborhood forever, she just got her first reality check. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more HOA and Karen tales. Your support is what keeps these stories coming.